Varish could barely breathe. The air burned her lungs, each breath a struggle. The thick, greenish fog that covered the surface of Sci-Fi 7 was not meant for her kind. Her body trembled as she staggered forward, her legs weak. Every step was harder than the last. The ground beneath her was cracked and lifeless, covered in pools of toxic sludge that bubbled like something alive. Her family had left her here to die. She could still hear her brother's cold words in her head. "You are no longer one of us, Varish. You have shamed our house. This is your punishment." She had begged them. She had cried. But it did not matter. They had thrown her onto this planet and left without looking back. Now she was alone. Her head felt dizzy and her vision blurred. She dropped to her knees, gasping for air. The poison in the atmosphere was creeping into her body. Soon, she would stop breathing. Soon, everything would fade away. Just as her eyes began to close, a strange sound reached her ears, a mechanical hissing noise, followed by footsteps. Someone was approaching. Varish forced herself to lift her head, her blurry vision making out a dark figure moving toward her. It was covered in some kind of suit, its face hidden behind a reflective helmet. The figure knelt beside her, and she felt something cold and metallic press against her face. Then, suddenly, air, clean, breathable air, rushed into her lungs. Varish coughed, gasping as her body desperately took in the oxygen. Her head spun as strength slowly returned to her limbs. The figure pressed a small device on the mask now covering her mouth and nose. A voice, deep but unfamiliar, came through the device. "Breathe slowly. Your body needs time to adjust." Her heart pounded. Who was this? Varish blinked and finally saw the one who had saved her, a human. She had heard of their kind before. Her people always spoke of them with disdain, calling them a primitive species, unworthy of attention. Yet, here one was, on a deadly planet, standing before her, saving her life. The human tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. His suit was bulky, built for extreme environments. A small blue light blinked on his wrist device as he checked something. "You're lucky I found you," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You wouldn't have lasted much longer out here." Varish's throat was dry, but she forced herself to speak. "Why are you here?" The human tapped the side of his helmet. "I could ask you the same thing. This planet isn't exactly a tourist spot." She looked away, her mind still processing everything. Why would a human save her? The human let out a small sigh and reached into a small satchel on his side. He pulled out a metallic bottle and held it out to her. "Drink this. It'll help." Varish hesitated. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust anyone anymore. But her body was weak, and she needed water. Slowly, she took the bottle and drank. The liquid was cool and soothing, easing the burning in her throat. The human nodded. "Good. Now, can you walk?" Varish tried to push herself up, but her legs wobbled. Before she could fall, the human caught her arm and steadied her. "Easy," he muttered. "No sudden moves." She looked up at him, feeling a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Who are you?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Isaac Carter." Isaac studied her for a moment before asking, "And you?" Varish hesitated. She was no longer Varish of House Keldron. That title had been taken from her. She was nothing now, just a discarded soul left to rot on this wasteland. "Varish." Isaac nodded. "All right, Varish, we need to get moving. This planet isn't safe." She frowned. "Why should I go with you?" Isaac gave her a simple, unreadable look. "Because if you stay here, you'll die." He turned and motioned for her to follow. She looked around at the wasteland, the bubbling pools of acid, the poisonous fog rolling in once more. Isaac had given her a choice. Stay and die, or go with him and survive. Varish took a shaky breath. For now, she would follow. She had no other choice. Varish followed Isaac through the wasteland, her legs still weak but moving. The toxic air swirled around them, thick and heavy, but the biomask Isaac had given her kept her breathing. The land stretched endlessly in every direction. Gray, cracked ground, lifeless trees that had turned to stone, and deep pools of bubbling green acid. This was a planet where nothing should live. Yet, somehow, a human was here. She glanced at Isaac, who moved with careful steps, his helmet scanning the area. He had no wings, no natural armor, no advanced tech like her people. And yet he had survived where she had nearly died. "Why are you here?" she finally asked. Isaac didn't look at her. "My ship crashed. I've been stranded for weeks." Varish frowned. "You mean you're stuck here too?" Isaac nodded. "For now. But I'm working on a way out." She studied him. If his ship had crashed, then he had no way of leaving either. So why had he saved her? The ground shook slightly beneath them, and Isaac suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said, raising his hand. Varish froze, her body tensing. Isaac pressed a button on his wrist device, and a holographic scanner appeared. "Something's moving," he muttered. Varish's heart pounded. The creatures of Typhos 7 were rare, but the ones that survived were deadly. A low hissing sound came from ahead. The ground cracked. Then, from the shadows of a dead tree, a massive creature slithered forward. Its body was covered in dark, slimy scales, and its head had 6 glowing eyes. Venom dripped from its fangs as it slowly crept toward them. Varish's breath caught in her throat. A dreadstalker. She had heard stories of these beasts, silent hunters that lived in the toxic lands, feeding on anything that breathed. Even her people feared them. Isaac didn't move. He reached to his side and pulled out a strange weapon. It wasn't a traditional blaster. It was a modified human rifle, covered in scrap metal and alien parts. "Stay behind me," he said calmly. Varish hesitated. She had fought before, but she had no weapons. She had been left to die with nothing. The dreadstalker lunged. Isaac fired. A bright red blast shot from his weapon, hitting the creature in the side of the head. The dreadstalker screeched, but it didn't fall. Isaac cursed under his breath. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. The creature charged. Isaac dodged to the left, rolling onto the ground. Varish stumbled back as the dreadstalker turned toward her, its glowing eyes locking onto her face. "No, not like this. I won't die here." She saw Isaac raise his rifle again. But the creature was too close. Acting on instinct, Varish did the only thing she could. She kicked the ground, sending a wave of loose dust and toxic gas into the air. The dreadstalker hesitated for half a second, just enough time. Isaac took the shot. The blast hit the creature in the eye, and this time it collapsed. Its body twitched for a moment before going still. Silence. Isaac let out a breath and looked at Varish. That was smart. Varish, still shaken, nodded. I learned how to fight before my exile." Isaac studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the distant hills. "We should move. My camp isn't far. A shelter in the wasteland." They walked for what felt like an hour before they reached a large rock formation. Hidden between 2 jagged cliffs was a metal structure, covered in dust and scrap parts. It wasn't much. It barely looked stable, but it was shelter. Isaac tapped a panel on the side, and a metal door slid open, revealing the dimly lit interior. Inside, Varish saw human technology, but it was patched together with alien materials. Old ship parts, scavenged weapons, even a broken hoverbike sat in the corner. Isaac took off his helmet, revealing his face for the first time. His dark hair was messy, his skin covered in dust and sweat. Varish was silent. She had expected him to look more fearsome, but he was just human. He set his rifle down and turned to her. "You're lucky I found you. Most beings don't survive out there." Varish crossed her arms. "You are surviving." Isaac smirked. "Humans adapt." She looked around again, realizing something important. "If you've been here for weeks, Why haven't you left yet? Isaac sighed. I've been trying, but my distress beacon is weak, and the only way to boost it requires a power source that I don't have. Varish frowned. Maybe I can help. Isaac raised an eyebrow. You? She lifted her chin. I was once an engineer before my family betrayed me. Isaac stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. All right, Varish. Let's see if you can fix this. For the first time since her exile, Varish felt something new, a purpose. Varish sat on a cold metal crate, watching Isaac work on the distress beacon. The small device flickered weakly, sending out a low-power signal that would never reach deep space. She had seen human technology before, simple, rugged, and built to last. But Isaac's equipment was different. His devices were a mix of human ingenuity and alien scraps, carefully put together to survive this hostile planet. So, you're an engineer? Isaac asked, adjusting the beacon settings. Varish nodded. I was. Before my family abandoned me. Isaac glanced at her. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Varish hesitated. For weeks, she had been alone, with no one to talk to. And yet, here was this human, offering help with no reason to. She exhaled. My family is powerful, one of the ruling houses of my homeworld. I was next in line to inherit their empire, but my brother, Cal, wanted that power for himself. Isaac frowned. So, he got rid of you. She clenched her fists. He framed me for treason. My own father believed him. Instead of execution, they gave me a different punishment. They left me here, on this toxic wasteland, to die in silence. Isaac was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. That's cold. Varish looked away. It is our way. The strong lead, the weak are discarded. Isaac let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, well, humans don't work like that. We don't throw away our own. Varish studied him, something stirring inside her. Humans were different. Everyone knew that. But she had never thought about how. Isaac adjusted the beacon again. Your brother sounds like a real problem. If we get off this planet, what's stopping him from trying again? Varish's jaw tightened. Nothing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the flickering beacon. Finally, Isaac sighed. All right, let's focus on getting out of here first. If you really were an engineer, maybe you can help fix this mess. Varish smirked slightly. Step aside, human. Let me show you how it's done. The power source hunt. Isaac handed her a multi-tool, and she quickly started inspecting the beacon. The core module was damaged, but if they could replace it, they might get a stronger signal. We need a power source, she said. Something strong enough to boost the signal. Isaac rubbed his chin. There's an old crash site nearby. A ship that fell here years ago. If the reactor is still intact, we might find what we need. Varish nodded. Then we go there. Isaac stood up and grabbed his rifle. It won't be easy. The last time I went near that wreck, I saw things moving inside it. Varish narrowed her eyes. Creatures. Isaac nodded. Big ones. She exhaled, steadying herself. Then we fight if we must. Isaac smirked. Now you're starting to sound human. A graveyard of ships. They walked for almost an hour, navigating through the wasteland. The sky above was a permanent green haze, with toxic winds swirling across the cracked ground. Finally, they'd reached the wreckage site. A massive destroyed spaceship lay in pieces, its metal frame rusted and broken. The ship had crashed long ago, but scavengers in time had stripped it down to a skeleton. Varish studied the wreck. Where's the reactor? She pointed toward the horizon. The green haze was shifting, forming a wall of dark clouds. It moved fast, like a hungry beast, consuming everything in its path. A toxic storm. Isaac muttered something under his breath. How bad? Varish tightened her grip on her makeshift metal pipe. Bad enough that if we don't find shelter, We won't live to see tomorrow. Isaac checked his wrist scanner. My camp is still too far. Varish's mind raced. There's an old ruin nearby. My people abandoned it long ago, but it might still be standing. Isaac didn't hesitate. Then let's move. The race against the storm. The wind howled, turning the air into a swirling poison. Varish and Isaac ran, their feet kicking up dust as the storm chased them. The ground beneath them shook, small cracks forming as acid rain began to fall in thick, sizzling drops. Isaac pulled his hood over his helmet, shielding his visor. Where is this ruin? Varish's heart pounded. Close. She spotted the shadow of an ancient structure ahead. Half-buried stone pillars and a domed entrance carved into the rocky cliffs. They rushed inside just as the storm slammed into the landscape, sending dust and toxic gas swirling around them. Isaac leaned against the wall, catching his breath. That was close. Varish looked outside. The storm had turned the world into a dark green haze. If they had been caught in it, they would have suffocated within minutes. She turned back to the ruins. The inside was cold and silent, filled with the echoes of a lost civilization. Isaac exhaled. You said your people abandoned this place. Varish nodded. Long ago, before I was born. The air was always poisonous here, and my ancestors chose to leave rather than adapt. Isaac shook his head. Humans don't run from hard places. We make them livable. Varish studied him. That's why you survived here when others wouldn't. He smirked. Something like that. A dark presence awakens. As they explored the ruins, Varish felt uneasy. The air inside was too still. There were no sounds, no echoes of wind, no distant noises. It felt wrong. Isaac noticed it too. He ran his hand over the wall carvings, frowning. There's something beneath us. Varish stiffened. What do you mean? Isaac pulled out his wrist scanner and activated the depth sensors. A red dot blinked on the screen. Something large was moving underground. The storm outside howled louder, but Varish could barely hear it over the thunderous vibration beneath her feet. Then the floor cracked. Isaac grabbed her arm and pulled her back just as a massive claw burst through the stone. A deep, inhuman roar filled the chamber. Varish's blood ran cold. We are not alone. The terror below. The ground split open, revealing a dark pit. From its depths, a monstrous figure rose. It was massive, with jagged limbs, glowing red eyes, and a body covered in thick armored plating. Varish recognized it instantly. A ravager. Her people had sealed them away long ago, deep underground, hoping they would never wake again. But the storm, the shaking, had set it free. Isaac pulled out his rifle, aiming at the beast's head. Tell me that thing can be killed. Varish swallowed. Not easily. The ravager lunged. Isaac fired, but the bullets bounced off its thick armor. Varish grabbed a rusted spear from the ground and struck at its leg, but it barely flinched. Isaac growled. We need a plan. Varish's mind raced. Then she spotted something. An old energy column, cracked but still humming with power. She turned to Isaac. If we can lure it there, we might be able to overload it. Isaac nodded. Then let's make it angry. The final stand. Isaac ran to the left, shouting. The ravager roared, chasing him. Varish sprinted toward the energy column, activating the old controls. The machine hummed to life, glowing brighter and brighter. Now, Isaac, she yelled. Isaac dodged just in time as Varish smashed a metal lever. A burst of electricity shot out, engulfing the ravager. The creature shrieked, its armor cracking as energy surged through its body. Then, with a final, deafening roar, it collapsed, its body turning into a smoldering husk. The ruins fell silent. Isaac panted. Remind me never to visit alien ruins again. Varish grinned, despite herself. You handled yourself well, for a human. Isaac chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. They turned toward the entrance. The storm was clearing. And now, with the energy core in hand, their chance to escape was finally within reach. The toxic storm had passed, leaving the landscape eerily silent. The sky above Sci-Fi 7 remained a sickly shade of green, but at least now, the winds had calmed. Isaac adjusted the straps on his backpack, making sure the energy core was secure. "Let's get back before something else tries to kill us." Varish nodded, still catching her breath. Their battle with the Ravager had drained her, but they had won. That alone was a rare victory. They set off across the wasteland, moving quickly. The trip back to Isaac's makeshift outpost would take time, and the last thing they needed was another unexpected encounter. But Varish couldn't shake a strange feeling in her chest, a sense of unease, like something was watching them. She glanced at Isaac. "We are being followed." Isaac's hand tightened around his rifle. "I was hoping I was just paranoid." "Guess not." The shadows on the horizon. As they crossed a ridge, Isaac's visor detected movement in the distance. A ship. Sleek, black, and hovering just above the wasteland. Its thrusters hummed with alien energy. Varish's stomach twisted. "That's a military vessel from my homeworld." Isaac frowned. "Let me guess. Not here to rescue you." Varish shook her head. "No. If my brother knows I'm still alive, he'll want to finish what he started." Isaac muttered something under his breath. "Great. And here I was thinking this day couldn't get worse." The ship descended, and from its side, a squad of armored soldiers stepped out, their weapons glowing with energy. At the front stood Cal, her brother. The confrontation. Cal's golden armor gleamed under the weak sunlight. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was cold. "Varish, I never thought I'd see you again." Varish forced herself to stand tall. "You left me here to die." Cal sighed. "You should have. But now, you've made things complicated." He turned his gaze toward Isaac, eyes narrowing. "And you, a human, helping my sister." Isaac didn't flinch. "Yeah. Weird how I don't like watching people get left to die." Cal smirked. "You don't understand, human. My sister is a disgrace to our family. She is a traitor." Varish clenched her fists. "You lied to them. You framed me." Cal shrugged. "Perhaps, but it doesn't matter now." He raised his hand, and his soldiers aimed their weapons at them. "Surrender, Varish, and I might make your death quick." Isaac rolled his shoulders. "Yeah, that's not happening." Cal's eyes flashed. "You think you can fight us? My warriors are the best in the Empire." Isaac smirked. "Funny, because I've been stuck on this planet fighting worse things for weeks, and I'm still standing." Cal frowned. "Enough. Kill the human. Bring my sister to me. The battle begins." Isaac moved first, diving behind a rock formation as the first energy blast struck the ground. Varish lunged forward, grabbing one of the fallen spears from the ruins. She spun the weapon, deflecting a blast aimed at her. Isaac fired back, his rifle's energy shots hitting two of the soldiers, knocking them off their feet. Varish's heart pounded. She had no armor, no advanced weapons, but she had her skills. She dodged an attack, spun behind one of the soldiers, and drove her spear into his power pack, disabling his armor. Isaac, meanwhile, used the terrain to his advantage. He was fast, unpredictable, his fighting style unlike anything the soldiers had trained for. Cal, watching from a distance, frowned. "This human fights like an animal." Varish grinned. "No, he fights like someone who refuses to lose." Cal versus Isaac. Cal drew his blade, stepping forward. His elite training made him a dangerous opponent. Isaac met him head-on, using his rifle like a melee weapon. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. Cal was stronger, but Isaac was smarter. He dodged Cal's strikes, using quick footwork and unexpected attacks to keep him off balance. Finally, Isaac feinted left, then struck Cal's wrist, knocking the blade from his hand. Cal staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. Isaac raised his rifle. "Looks like I win." But before he could fire, Cal activated a hidden shield, sending a shockwave that knocked Isaac to the ground. Varish reacted instantly. She threw her spear, striking Cal's shield generator. The device exploded, leaving him defenseless. She stood over him, breathing hard. Cal, trapped beneath the rubble, glared at her. "Go ahead. Kill me." Varish hesitated. "No, I'm not like you." Isaac pushed himself up, wincing. "Good choice, but we need to go. Now." They turned and ran. With Cal's forces weakened, they had their chance to escape. As they disappeared into the wasteland, Cal growled, "This isn't over." A desperate escape. Isaac and Varish reached the outpost, breathing hard. The beacon was still waiting, the energy core their only hope. Varish wasted no time, quickly connecting the core to the system. The beacon flashed green. Isaac exhaled. "Is it working?" Varish nodded. "Yes. The signal is strong now. Someone will find us." Isaac grinned. "Good, because I'm starting to get tired of this place." Varish looked at him. "You fought well today." Isaac smirked. "Yeah, I do that sometimes." For the first time in a long while, Varish felt something she hadn't in ages. Hope. But deep inside, she knew Cal wouldn't give up. Their fight wasn't over yet. And soon, Isaac would learn just how dangerous the Empire truly was. Isaac and Varish stood inside the makeshift outpost, watching as the distress beacon pulsed with a bright green light. The signal was strong now. Someone would come. But would it be a rescue or a new threat? Varish tightened her grip on the metal spear she had salvaged from the ruins. She knew her brother Cal wasn't the type to accept defeat. He would return. And soon. Isaac checked his rifle. "How long do you think we have before they come back?" Varish's expression was grim. "Not long. Cal doesn't like losing. He will send more soldiers." Isaac exhaled. Figures. No way things would be that easy. Outside, the wasteland was silent, but the air felt heavy, like something was coming. And then the silence broke. A loud roar of engines echoed through the sky. Varish's heart sank. They had arrived. The arrival of the elite warriors. A large transport ship descended from the green-tinted clouds, kicking up a storm of dust and debris. The side doors opened, and a squad of heavily armed warriors leaped down. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were Cal's elite guard, trained killers, bred for battle. Their armor gleamed, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Isaac muttered, "Well, that's not good." Varish narrowed her eyes. "These are my brother's best warriors. They won't stop until we are both dead." Isaac smirked slightly. "Then we better make sure that doesn't happen." The leader of the squad stepped forward. His voice rang out through a helmet speaker. "Human, surrender now, and we will spare your life. But the traitor Varish belongs to us." Isaac scoffed. "Yeah, see, I don't really trust people who leave others to die, so I think I'll pass on that offer." Varish braced herself. "They will attack soon." The soldier raised his energy sword. "Then you die together." With a single hand signal, the battle began. The fight for survival. The warriors charged, their speed unnatural, their weapons deadly. Isaac dodged a plasma bolt, rolling behind a metal crate. He fired back, his rifle sending out red energy blasts. One of the warriors staggered, but his armor absorbed most of the impact. They were well equipped. This wouldn't be easy. Varish met one of them head-on, using her spear to block a powerful strike from an energy blade. Sparks flew as metal clashed. The soldier pressed forward, forcing Varish back. She gritted her teeth. "I won't go back." She twisted her body, using the soldier's momentum against him. She slammed her elbow into his helmet, then drove her knee into his ribs. He stumbled, and she knocked his weapon away. Isaac, meanwhile, was in the middle of 3 warriors. He ducked under a sword swing, then smashed the butt of his rifle into one's helmet. Another swung at him, but he grabbed a loose metal pipe and blocked the attack. Isaac grinned. "You guys ever hear about human adaptability?" He sidestepped, causing one warrior's blade to slice through his own teammate's armor. Varish leaped onto a stack of crates, flipping over 2 warriors who tried to grab her. She landed behind them and swept their legs out, making them fall into the dirt. But then a blast struck her side. She cried out, falling to her knees. Isaac turned, his eyes burning with anger. "Hey!" Before the warrior could strike again, Isaac rushed forward, grabbed the enemy's wrist, and twisted it, forcing him to drop his weapon. Then Isaac slammed his fist into the soldier's helmet visor, cracking it. The warrior collapsed. Isaac helped Varish up, worry in his eyes. "You good?" She nodded, breathing hard. "I can still fight." Isaac chuckled. "Yeah, I figured." But the battle wasn't over yet. The final duel. Kale returns. The dust settled, and the elite warriors lay defeated. But then, footsteps. Kale himself stepped onto the battlefield, his golden armor shining in the dim light. His expression was cold. "I underestimated you both." Varish's grip tightened on her spear. "This ends here, Kale." Kale smirked. "Yes, it does. But not in the way you think." He drew his weapon, a double-edged energy blade, its glow illuminating the area. Isaac raised his rifle. "I don't suppose you'll just leave if I ask nicely." Cal's smirk widened. "No, but I will give you a warrior's death." And then he attacked. Kale was fast, too fast. His strikes came like a storm, forcing both Varish and Isaac back. Varish blocked a heavy swing, but the impact nearly knocked her down. Isaac dodged left, raising his rifle, but Kale was already on him, kicking the weapon out of his hands. Kale slashed, but Isaac ducked, rolling to the side. He grabbed a broken metal rod and swung it like a club, blocking Cal's next strike. Varish saw an opening. She lunged, aiming for Cal's exposed side. But at the last second, he turned, catching her weapon with his bare hand. Varish's eyes widened. Kale smiled cruelly. "Not fast enough. Sister." He threw her backward, her body hitting the ground hard. Isaac gritted his teeth. "You really enjoy this, don't you?" Kale raised his sword. "Weakness must be punished." Isaac smirked. "Yeah. Then you're about to get punished real bad." At that moment, Isaac grabbed a flash grenade from his belt and activated it. A blinding light exploded, forcing Kale to stumble back, covering his eyes. Varish, recovering, saw her chance. She grabbed her fallen spear and charged forward, slashing across Cal's chest plate. His armor cracked. Kale fell to one knee, stunned. Isaac quickly retrieved his rifle, aiming it at Cal. "Looks like you lost, buddy." Kale glared at them, breathing heavily. "This isn't over." Isaac smirked. "It kinda feels like it is." Varish looked at Isaac. "We need to leave. Now." They ran toward the outpost, leaving Cal behind. As they reached the beacon, a blue light flashed in the sky. A ship was coming. Their rescue had arrived. But neither of them knew who was inside or what would come next. A bright blue light flashed in the sky, growing larger by the second. Isaac and Varish stood near the distress beacon, breathing hard from the battle. The ship was coming, but they didn't know who it belonged to. Isaac tightened his grip on his rifle. Friendly or not? Varish's eyes narrowed. "We will find out soon." Behind them, Kale was still on his knees, his damaged armor smoking. His elite warriors lay defeated, unable to stop what was coming. The ship descended, its engines humming with power. The symbol on its hull became clearer, a neutral mercenary emblem. Varish exhaled. "They are not from my homeworld. This could be good." The ship's side doors opened, and a tall figure stepped out. A human. Isaac blinked in surprise. Well, I wasn't expecting that. The man wore a battle-worn spacesuit with scared armor plates attached. His expression was calm but sharp, like someone who had seen too many battles. His eyes studied Isaac and Varish before he spoke. You the ones who sent the beacon. Isaac lowered his rifle slightly. Yeah, that would be us. The man nodded. Name's Captain Doran. My crew picked up your distress call. We don't usually come to Sci-Fi 7, but your signal was strong. Varish stepped forward, her posture still wary. Are you mercenaries? Doran smirked. We prefer independent operators. But yeah, close enough. Isaac crossed his arms. And you're not here to kill us. Doran chuckled. Not unless you give me a reason to. Varish exchanged a glance with Isaac. This was their chance. But before she could speak, a weak but sharp voice interrupted. You can't escape me. Varish turned. Kel was pushing himself up, his face twisted with rage and defiance. I will find you again, sister. You will always be hunted. Varish felt a surge of emotions. Anger, sadness, but also relief. Kel had lost today. He was powerful, but even he had limits. Isaac sighed. Man, you just don't quit, do you? Varish took a deep breath. No, Isaac, he won't stop. Not unless I make sure he does. She stepped toward Kel, standing tall. I am not the weak girl you left behind, Kel. I have changed. I have survived. Kel gritted his teeth, but there was doubt in his eyes now. Varish continued. You can keep chasing me. You can keep calling me a traitor. But one day, you will realize that I was never the enemy. Kel said nothing. He just stood there, breathing heavily, his pride shattered. Varish turned her back on him. Goodbye, Kel. Then she walked toward the mercenary ship, toward a new future. Leaving Sci-Fi 7. Inside the ship, Isaac and Varish secured themselves in the passenger seats. The engines rumbled as the pilot prepared for liftoff. Captain Doran sat across from them, arms crossed. So, what's your story? Isaac smirked. Stranded human. Exiled alien noble. Big mess. You know, the usual. Doran raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a fun time. Varish leaned forward. Where are you heading? Doran shrugged. Anywhere that pays. But if you two need transport, we can talk business. Isaac and Varish looked at each other. Neither of them had a home to return to. Isaac grinned. Well, I do like ships. And not dying. Varish nodded. And I am good with technology. Doran smirked. Then welcome aboard. The ship lifted off, breaking through Sci-Fi 7's thick atmosphere. As they left the toxic world behind, Varish felt something new inside her. For the first time, in a long time, she was free. Isaac glanced at her. So, Varish, what now? She smiled. Now, we see what the stars have to offer. Isaac grinned. I like that plan. The ship shot into hyperspace, carrying them toward a new adventure.